for the Arts. We welcome you all present here and also those watching the program live on Facebook and YouTube. Today we have assembled here for the occasion of releasing and discussing a book, the book titled BAKU'S Temple of Eternal Fire, its connections to Baba Nanak and the Udasi Sadhus, authored by Professor K.T.S. Sarao and published by Bloomsbury. Today's event is aromatic with the graceful presence of eminent scholars. We have with us here Dr. Ashraf Shikaliev, His Excellency Ambassador of Azerbaijan to India as a chief guest. Professor K.T.S. Sarao, former head and Professor of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Professor Kaldeep Chandagnoti, former Vice Chancellor of Central University of Himachal Pradesh. Professor Archana Upadhyay, Chairperson, Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Dr. Sachidan Joshi, Member Secretary of IGNCA. I would now request Professor Ramesh Chand Gaurji, the moderator for today's program, to kindly accompany the dignitaries onto the dais. I request Dr. Sachidan Joshi ji, Member Secretary IGNCA, the chairperson for today's program, kindly now felicitate the dignitaries. I request my dear colleague to bring the mementos on the dais. Dr. Ashraf Shikaliev as a chief guest. Professor K.T.S. Sarao. Professor Kaldeep Chandagnoti. Professor Archana Upadhyay. I request all the honorable dignitaries now to formally launch the book. The book titled BAKU'S Temple of Eternal Fire, its connections to Baba Nanak and the Udasi Sadhus. Thank you so much for all guests. Now I request to Professor Ramesh Chandra Gaur to formally welcome to the audience present here. Before this, a brief introduction about Gaur sir. Gaurji. Professor Ramesh Chandra Gaur is presently the Dean and Director, Library and Information and Head Kalanidhi Division at IGNCA.
Namaskar, good evening. Thanks, Harsha. It is indeed a great pleasure to extend a very hearty welcome to all the eminent guests on dais, as well as the audience in the hall, as also those who have joined us through IGNCA YouTube. To this program of launch and book discussion of that book, BAKU'S Temple of Eternal Fire, its connection to Baba Nanak and the Udasi Sadhus, authored by Professor K.D.S. Rao, who is retired from Delhi University as a professor and head department and an eminent scholar. So let me first begin by congratulating him on this wonderful work and thanks him for agreeing to have this book launch program in Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. To do the honor, we have His Excellency and eminent guest. So first I extend a very warm welcome to His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Shekhalev, Ambassador of Azerbaijan to India, for a kind presence and agreeing to be the chief guest in today's book discussion and doing the honor of launching the book. I welcome you, His Excellency, and thanks for your kind presence. We have with us Professor Dr. Agnihotri, who is a former Vice Chancellor of Himachal Pradesh, Central University Himachal Pradesh. Thank you, sir, for your kind presence and agreeing to be one of the speakers in this program. We also have with us Professor Rachna Upadhyay, who is a professor in Center for Russian and Central Studies and also the chairperson of this center in the School of International Study in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome, Professor Upadhyay. And today's program is being chaired by Member Secretary, Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, Dr. Sachidanand Joshi, who is a very able administrator, a great academician, and pleased to share that in last year he has received 4 national honors for his writings, Maithili Sharan Gupta Award, and several other awards. So welcome you, sir, and thank you for your kind presence. The book which we are going to discuss today is something very important with India's cultural connections with the rest of the world, and in this connection, we have been discussing several such programs in the past, and today it is indeed a great pleasure that we are talking about our cultural linkages with Azerbaijan, and to know more about this publication and also the various aspects of the book, who can be better than the author himself. So now I invite Professor Sarao to introduce the books to the guests and audience. Professor Sarao.
Thank you very much, Professor Gaur. I'm really grateful. His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Shekhalev, Ambassador of Azerbaijan to India, Professor Sachidanand Joshi Sahab, Professor Rachna Upadhyay, my very dear friend Professor Agnihotri ji, I do a lot of trekking and walking. Once I came walking all the way from England to India, and I was passing through Russia in those days when Perestroika had just set in. I saw some of these places, and then in the recent past, I went again to Baku, which is a beautiful place on the banks of Caspian Sea, and again had the opportunity of seeing this beautiful temple. I already had a little bit of a very acrimonious conversation with His Excellency Shekhalev. He thought that I should have thanked the Azerbaijan government for preserving and taking care of this temple. Of course, I think he's right. Maybe I apologize. Maybe I should have, I think. But as a research scholar, you do not generally think of favoring this or favoring that. You do a kind of impartial academic work where you end up rubbing shoulders with the people who may not necessarily feel happy. So it wasn't my intention really to kind of show ungratefulness towards Azerbaijan by writing this book and mentioning a few things in perhaps friendly criticism about the way the temple in the modern times has been developed by the Azerbaijan government, which of course with very good intentions they have applied for the cultural heritage. The Honorable President of Azerbaijan and his wife have very actively taken keen interest in the preservation and development of this temple, of course. Now the present structure of this temple is around 300 plus years, and it is very clearly a Hindu temple. There are about 26 chambers in which the sadhus used to meditate largely. And then there is one balkhane, guest room, on top of the entrance. And in this temple we have 25 inscriptions installed on the entrance doors of the chambers. 20 of them are in Sanskrit. Actually, one has been lost. Total were 25, no, I think 24. 2 are in Gurumukhi and 2 are in Landa script, which was used in present-day Indian and Pakistani Punjab, basically the Multan area, which is now in Pakistan. The language which the shopkeepers used to keep financial records. Landa script, as you know, doesn't have matras, so not so easy to read it. I was able to read only one out of the 2 inscriptions. I had to work really for about 6 months only on reading it. Still the reading is very faulty. But the Sanskrit inscriptions, of course, are very easy to read and translate. And the 2 Gurumukhi, which is my mother tongue, of course, without any difficulty, I was able to read. The 2 Gurumukhi inscriptions are basically the Mool Mantra of Sikhism, which is the kind of the central thing in Sikhism. And the names of some Udasi sadhus are also mentioned in these 2 inscriptions. And at about 6 or 7 places in the inscriptions, it is mentioned that this is the temple of Jawalaji, dedicated to Jawalaji. And I had the opportunity of looking at the travelogues and other records of Europeans who met Indians who were on pilgrimage to Baku, to this temple. And they have mentioned that. And there are some other forms of information that clearly shows that, including the inscriptions that mention it, that the Indian temple of Jawalaji in Himachal is Chota Jawalaji, and the one in Azerbaijan is the Maha Jawalaji, the bigger Jawalaji. And I also had the opportunity of reading the Vedic literature pertaining to fire worship and how the Zoroastrians worship fire. And commonly, people like me, I think most of the persons who work on the Vedic literature, the Sanskrit, the Vedas, they agree that the Zoroastrians and the Indian Aryans, or the Aryans, they were the same. For example, if you look at the Zendavasta, the names of various deities, almost everything is same, really. Jatcha is called Jasna and so on and so forth, and you have Devas and you have the Asuras, and all the deities are the same. So the Aryans possibly at one point in time branched into 2. And there were small changes in the way they worshipped. The Zoroastrians have a sort of platform, and they build temples on hills or hillocks, normally not in plains, they prefer that. And Hindus have a very specific rule to have a Vedi. When you use fire, you worship Agni. Rigveda, as you know, has 200 hymns of the Rigveda dedicated to Lord Agni. So worship of fire is very, very special to the Hindus. And we have special rules how the Vedi is to be built. And the Azerbaijani government very kindly has also built a replica of this temple about 5 kilometers from this temple. And this replica has been built over a small hillock. because perhaps somehow they got the impression that maybe it is a Zoroastrian temple, or perhaps a common temple of the Zoroastrians and the Hindus. So therefore, on a small hillock. But the replica has a Vedi, not the platform, and has the Trishul on top. I have in my book also given statistical study of the inscriptions, because that is what I actually specialize. I am a person of ancient Indian history and culture and Buddhism. For example, the Tri Shakti, that is the Om, the Swastika, and Trishul, are mentioned at dozens of places in the inscriptions they are drawn. Swastika has been drawn so many times. Almost every inscription begins with Om Namah Shivaya, and then swastika is drawn. And the Panchayatan, the 5 deities, in which Ganesh is the central figure, and the other 4 important deities are also mentioned again and again. And on this basis, I have written this book, in which I have basically tried to show that in Azerbaijan, the present Azerbaijan, over there fire has been worshipped for maybe about 4,000 to 6,000 years, at least. And I have also done some research on the name of Baku itself. One of the 2 hypotheses is that Baku'an or Baku'an or Bhagwan, it possibly has its origin to the word Bhagwan, which means God, and so on and so forth. So the common culture of the Azerbaijanis and us is sort of same. And so therefore, it appears to me that this temple is basically purely a Hindu temple of Jawalaji. And that story of Jawalaji, different pieces of the body fall and fire emanates, that kind of myth also somehow appears to be linked to this place. And now in the modern times, of course, after the Russians, so after the breakup of the Soviet Union, when Azerbaijan became independent, the Azerbaijani government has, of course, taken keen interest in the development and preservation of this temple. The president and his wife have paid many visits to this temple, made massive donations for the preservation of this temple, and applied for the heritage status of this temple. Of course, they're doing very good work. And but very strange, not many Indians know about it. And it's very, very, very strange. For example, Sikhs who are very active, they are very rich, and they are very happy to sort of donate and work. Sikhs also have done almost nothing. And when I pointed out to my Sikh friends that Baba Nanak's name has been mentioned specifically in one of the inscriptions, which clearly indicates that Baba Nanak had come here and stayed in this temple. And so they were very enthusiastic, and most of them expressed kind of shock that they were not aware of it. And let me tell you, I think I've already taken more time than is earmarked for me. Let me tell you this, that there is a sort of big controversy about the 4 itineraries of Baba Nanak. He traveled all over Asia and parts of Africa. And one of his udasis, they call it udasi, the travels, he came via Baku. And other than that, there is very, very little evidence to prove that Baba Nanak actually went all the way to Mecca. And most of the scholars who have worked on it, they say that it is basically a myth. Baba Nanak never went to Mecca. I think this inscription is one way of showing that Baba Nanak actually went to Mecca and then returned via this place. So I told my Sikh friends that this is one very good evidence to prove that Babaji had gone into Central Asia and he was possibly returning from Mecca. And so they should do more work on. So they were very enthusiastic and very happy. Apparently, Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, I think, called a meeting, and they wanted to do something about this temple. For example, to start some sort of, tours, chartered flights or something, because there are virtually millions of Sikhs. If it is made known to them that it is a kind of very important temple which has association with the Udasi Parampara. The Udasi Parampara started by Baba Nanak's elder son, Shri Chand. And Baba Nanak's name is mentioned there. So it can develop into a very important tourist spot. And I think almost every Sikh would like to go and visit that place. So that was the idea. So the Sikh gentlemen were really kind of very happy that this has been brought to light. So my intention basically has been to highlight that we have one very important temple in Central Asia, and that area is basically Islamic. For example, Azerbaijan, I think 97% or so population is Muslim. And over there, you have this kind of beautiful temple, which is a Hindu temple, which has kind of survived through all those years when Russians were doing all kinds of things there. Atheistic, did not believe in religion, so on and so forth, gave contract to Mr. Nobel, who took out all the gas of that area, and this eternal fire actually was blown out of existence by the Russians, by Nobel and his friends, at the behest of the Russians, I suppose. So I think my basic idea has been to highlight this temple and perhaps in the future promote tourism in that area, and also sort of cultural cooperation between Azerbaijan and India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sarao, for bringing so many hidden facts. And this is going to help a number of in creating awareness on number of issues. And rightly, you have said that it will promote cultural linkages and also tourism between two countries. And also particularly two facts which came, just you mentioned about Jwalaji and the Baku'S and Bhagwan, and also the Udasi Sadhu Parampara and other. These three are very, very important, and some of the very historical linkages, and many people who believe in all those things will be definitely interested in visiting such an important place. And thanks for bringing out such an important book, and thanks for your wonderful insights and observations, and also letting us know more about the book. But now, how much you have been succeeding in your efforts, and what are the things you have covered? Let's have views of our experts, and I will begin with our first speaker in this regard, Professor Kaldeep Chandagnoti, who is currently the trustee of Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, and also he has served in the board of director of Hindustan Samachar Path. He has been associated with Jansatta newspaper, and more than that, he has served as a vice chancellor the Central University of Himachal Pradesh, and we feel honored to invite him for his views on the book and also on the related area. Thank you, Professor Gnoti.
धन्यवाद गौड़ जी। यहाँ उपस्थित अजरबैजान के राजदूत डॉक्टर अशरफ जी और अर्चना उपाध्याय जी और हमारे सचिव मेंबर सेक्रेटरी डॉक्टर सचिदानंद जोशी जी। बहुत अरसा पहले कहीं मैंने पढ़ा था, राहुल संकृत्यायन ने एक जगह जिक्र किया हुआ था कि जब मैं रूस में गया, उन दिनों रूस था, अजरबैजान स्वतंत्र तो नहीं था, तो कहता रूस के कुछ लोग मुझे पकड़ कर ले गए कि जहाँ एक मंदिर है, उस मंदिर की दीवारों पर कुछ लिखा हुआ है, हम तो पढ़ नहीं पाते क्या लिखा है, तो जो लोग बाहर से आते हैं उनको लेके जाते हैं कि भाई पढ़ो, शायद आप इसको समझ जाओगे। तो वो कहता मुझे भी लेकर गए कि तो बाकू की वो जिक्र कर रहा था। कहते जब मैंने देखा तो वहाँ एक धूना लगा हुआ था, जो शिव जी के जो उपासक है ना, धूना लगाते हैं, जहाँ दुर्गा के उपासक हैं, और एक त्रिशूल वहाँ लगा हुआ था, और दीवारों पास कोयले से किसी ने पंजाबी में माता की भेंटें लिखी हुई थी। दुर्गा को, जो दुर्गा की प्रशंसा में जो गीत गाते हैं उसको माता की भेंट कहा जाता है पंजाबी में। तो कहता मैंने अंदाज़ा लगाया कि पंजाब का साधु घूमता घामता इधर आया होगा, और जहाँ अकेला फंस गया होगा बेचारा बहुत देर, तो फिर करता क्या होगा, धुआं जलाकर बैठा रहता होगा, आसपास के लोग आते भी होंगे कुछ, तो जब कोयले होते होंगे तो कोयले से भी दीवारों पर वो माता की भेंटें लिखता होगा पंजाबी में। तो उसके बाद मैं भूल भाल गया, तो मैंने हिमाचल में ज्वालाजी में एक कार्यक्रम था, ज्वालामुखी में, तो मैंने उनसे बात की कि भाई इस प्रकार का एक ज्वालाजी का मंदिर उधर भी है। तो वो बड़े हैरान हुए, और बाद में वो मुझे पूछने लगे कि अग्निहोत्री कहाँ है, क्या है। मेरे पास तो उतनी इन्फॉर्मेशन थी जो राहुल संकृत्यायन ने दी हुई थी, तो दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में एक कार्यक्रम किया, डॉक्टर सराव के शिष्य ही हैं डॉक्टर संजय सिंह, तो उसमें सराव साहब भी आए हुए थे। तो मैंने उसमें जिक्र किया कि इस प्रकार राहुल संकृत्यायन का सेंट्रल एशिया में एक मंदिर है। तो सराव साहब कहने लगे मैं उसी पर आजकल किताब लिख रहा हूँ। तो भाई ये बहुत प्रसन्नता की बात है कि राहुल संकृत्यायन जिसको जहाँ छोड़ गए थे, तो डॉक्टर साहब ने उसको आगे बढ़ाया और मैं इनकी किताब पढ़ रहा था। इतनी सामग्री एक जगह इकट्ठी कर दी है, तो मैं समझता हूँ उसको पढ़कर दूसरे लोगों में भी लगेगा कि इस पर काम करना चाहिए। लेकिन अब वहाँ जो 22-23 कमरे जिनका जिक्र डॉक्टर साहब ने किया हुआ है, उसमें पंजाबी में माता की पेटें तो कम से कम नहीं होगी, क्योंकि मैंने आपकी किताब में कहीं जिक्र नहीं पढ़ा। और 23 जो वहाँ इंस्क्रिप्शंस हैं, उसमें आपने लिखा हुआ कि 2 तो अब पढ़ना मुश्किल है, मिटी गई होगी जा। और एक जो मैं आपको एक प्रकार से बधाई देना चाहता हूँ कि जिसकी स्क्रिप्ट जो है वो लंडे है, जिसको आप लांडा कह रहे थे, वो लंडा प्रैक्टिकली अंग्रेजी में थोड़ा गड़बड़ हो जाती है, तो पंजाबी वाले उसको लंडे स्क्रिप्ट कहते हैं। उसको पढ़ना बहुत ही मुश्किल है, जो लिखते हैं वो भी नहीं पढ़ सकते। लंडे में लिखा हुआ था कि लाला जी अजमेर गए तो पढ़ने वाले पढ़ गए, लाला जी मर गए। तो अब डॉक्टर साहब ने वो लंडे स्क्रिप्ट भी पढ़ लिया है और उसमें लिखा हुआ किताब में, मैं समझता हूँ ये बहुत बड़ा काम है। और जितने 2 को छोड़कर बाकी सभी उसमें आ गए हैं। सेंट्रल एशिया में देखिए, अब तो सेंट्रल एशिया में हिंदुस्तान वालों को जाना थोड़ा मुश्किल हो गया, रास्ता जो लैंड रूट है वो बंद हो गया है। अदरवाइज़ सेंट्रल एशिया से हमारा रिश्ता बहुत पुराना था। ये जो लगभग 15वीं शताब्दी में पंजाब में जब सप्त सिंधु क्षेत्र में जो 10 गुरु परंपरा शुरू हुई, उस परंपरा के पहले गुरु जो थे नानक देव जी, वो लगभग पूरे जम्बू द्वीप में घूमे थे। मैं जम्बू द्वीप इसलिए कह रहा हूँ, जब हम सेंट्रल एशिया, अजरबैजान, बाकी देशों की बात करते हैं तो एक पूरा कल्चरल इम्पैक्ट नहीं बनता। तो जम्बू द्वीप का उन दिनों एक पूरा कल्चरल इकाई थी एक प्रकार से, तो वो जम्बू द्वीप में घूमे थे। अब डॉक्टर साहब ने लिखा हुआ कि वहाँ उदासी संप्रदाय के साधु भी गए थे, और राहुल संकृत्यायन भी किसी साधु का जिक्र करता है। लेकिन डॉक्टर साहब ने अपनी किताब में लास्ट में वैसे लिख दिया है कि फलां सन में लास्ट साधु वहाँ कत्ल कर दिया गया था। अब वो भाई राहुल संकृत्यायन वाला था या दूसरा था, भगवान जाने, लेकिन जो अंतिम साधु वहाँ उस मंदिर में था उसको गुंडों ने मार दिया था, और उसके बाद शायद वहाँ कोई साधु नहीं गया। अब वो मंदिर कल्चरल डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर या आर्कियोलॉजी के अंतर्गत आ गया है। तो उस प्रकार से जैसे भारत में आर्कियोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट के मंदिर हैं, तो एक प्रकार से वो टूरिस्ट प्लेस हैं, उसमें आप जा सकते हो, देख सकते हो। अब डॉक्टर साहब की जो इन्होंने इच्छा जाहिर की है कि जहाँ से टूरिस्ट जाएं, तो मुझे लगता है ज्वाला जी से, जिसको वो मंदिर महाज्वाला माना जाता है, जो हिमाचल वाले तो छोटी ज्वाला जी का मंदिर माना जाता है, और बाकू वाले को महाज्वाला जी कहते हैं कि उसका बड़ा मंदिर है। इस प्रकार के संबंध बन सकते हैं। लेकिन मुझे एक बात और डॉक्टर साहब लगती है, यदि कुछ रिसर्च स्कॉलर इसमें गहराई से काम करें तो सेंट्रल एशिया के इन 5 देशों में और बहुत सी जगह ऐसी मिल जाएगी जहां पुराने इस प्रकार के आपको कुछ ना कुछ मॉन्यूमेंट मिल जाएंगे। और दूसरा जो बाकू का मंदिर है, ये ठीक है कि ईरान के लोग भी अग्नि देवता की पूजा करते हैं, उनका भी थोड़ा बहुत वहाँ रहा ही है, क्योंकि अग्नि देवता की पूजा ईरान वाले भी करते हैं, हिंदुस्तान वाले भी करते हैं, तो इसमें कॉमन बॉन्ड है। और सेंट्रल एशिया के लोग भी बहुत से अग्नि देवता की पूजा करते हैं। और जो लोग, जैसे इन्होंने कहा, जो विरासत से पिछड़ भी गए हैं, जब बिछड़ गए हैं, वो भी कहीं ना कहीं विरासत से कुछ अंशों में जुड़े हुए हैं। तो ऐसे यदि बहुत से स्थानों की खोजबीन की जाए तो मुझे लगता है हिंदुस्तान और सेंट्रल एशिया के जो बहुत पुराने संबंध हैं और अभी भी भीतर से कहीं ना कहीं आपस में जुड़े हुए हैं, उनको सशक्त करने के लिए इस प्रकार की रिसर्च का बहुत लाभ हो सकता है। और दूसरी बात, ये रिसर्च नीचे तक आनी चाहिए। देखिए होता क्या है, इस प्रकार की जो बहुत ही लाभदायक रिसर्च होती है वो टॉप पर रह जाती है, नीचे उसका ट्रांसमिशन नहीं हो पाता। और ट्रांसमिशन होकर जब नीचे आएगी तो डॉक्टर साहब ने तो वैसे बड़ा अच्छा काम किया, इस किताब का हिंदी ट्रांसलेशन भी किया है, और मुझे खतरा था कि शायद हिंदी ट्रांसलेशन का विमोचन करवाएंगे, लेकिन डॉक्टर साहब ने अंग्रेजी का ही करवाया। इनको लगता होगा हिंदी का करवाने से फिर थोड़ी गड़बड़ हो जाएगी, मामला नीचे हो गया है। तो अगली बार जब डॉक्टर साहब से मैं कहीं कार्यक्रम में मिलूंगा तो इनको कहूँगा हिंदी की किताब का भी विमोचन करवा लिया जाए। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, थैंक यू।
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful insights. And you rightly said that if you have to strengthen our relations, cultural relation with Central Asia, we need to undertake such project and studies. So now I would like to invite our next speaker, Professor Dr. Archana Upadhyay. She is currently the chairperson professor at Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Besides as a freelancer, she did a lot of work in helping in promoting Russian literature and helping various institutions like IGNCA who has been working on certain Russian literatures. So now I invite Professor Upadhyay. Over to you.
A very good afternoon to all of you, friends and esteemed panelists. His Excellency, Dr. Ashraf Shikalov, the Ambassador of the Republic of Azerbaijan to India, Professor Joshi, Professor Agnihotri, and Professor Sarao. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of this book discussion event, Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, Kalanidhi Division, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with this August gathering. In fact, the insightful introduction to this amazing book, I repeat, amazing book, BAKU'S Temple of Eternal Fire, its connections to Baba Nanak, and the Udasi Sadhus that we just heard from the learned author, Professor Sarao, strikes a deep chord within me. In fact, I had the privilege of seeing and experiencing what it actually means to be physically present in this sacred temple, in the sacred temple complex, I would say, that so rightfully is a UNESCO heritage site. And yes, I must compliment the government of Azerbaijan for actually doing everything possible to ensure that it remains a heritage site worthy of, not just the country to be proud of, but as a site which actually belongs to mankind. It all started with a field trip visit to this amazingly beautiful city of Baku with my colleague and friend, Dr. Preeti Das, in the year 2015. And it was Professor Jala Garibova, the vice rector of the Azerbaijan University of Languages, who arranged our visit to this priceless treasure at Surakhani, the Temple of Eternal Fire, or the Atishgah, as it is locally called. Till then, when I say we, I mean myself and my friend, till then what we knew about this place was that it was an ancient site of fire worshippers with a strong India connection and mainly Parsi connection. That's exactly what we thought and we believed. And in fact, little did we know that what was actually in store for us when we stepped into that temple complex. In fact, it was an experience that triggered some kind of a quest to know more about that place. And I can safely say that that quest has finally culminated in the reading of this book. It was so evident right from the very beginning, the moment we stepped into the temple complex and we went through the main entrance, that this temple certainly had some very strong Brahmanical Hindu connection. Although we went there believing that it was a Parsi shrine. The inscriptions which we saw immediately, the moment we stepped in Devanagari and Gurumukhi scripts, the invocation of Lord Ganesha, which the author has just pointed out, the symbols of Trishakti and the Panchayatam symbols, it was so visible all around that in fact we were a little confused. In fact, we were wondering that does the world know about the existence of a Hindu temple here? And what we were experiencing inside was something very, very extraordinary. In the sense, it's very difficult to put it in words, but it was some kind of a deep spiritual experience. And when we reported back to our gracious host, Professor Garibova, we not only thanked her for all that she had done to arrange that visit, but we told her that it felt like we had gone on a pilgrimage. Yes, indeed, it felt like that it was a pilgrimage. Now, coming to this book, I must tell you, and I'm being quite honest about it, that I've read the book twice in the last 1 week. And I still have not had enough of it, considering the fact that I can connect with everything that has been written. And I'm sure my friend feels the same. I would say it is very well researched. It is a treasure house of historical information. I would even go to the extent of saying that the book actually, it breathes life into each stone, brick, block, inscription, everything which actually has created this very beautiful temple complex. And it is so embedded in the Hindu and Sikh traditions. We noticed that there were inscriptions in Gurumukhi which we could not read, but certainly in Devanagari that we did read, we took pictures, we sent it to everybody in this world, whoever we could, and at that point in time it felt it was some novel discovery which we had made. And sir, it was in the year 2015, few years before you went there. Now the book actually provides an illuminating account of the tradition of fire worship in the Indic civilization. The legend of the Jivaji temple, that is the flame-tongued goddess, as the author describes, and the shrines dedicated to her. 2 shrines are mentioned, the small one in Kangra in Himachal Pradesh, and the larger and the bigger one, that is the Temple of Eternal Fire in Baku. The chapters that particularly has drawn my attention are chapters 5, 6, and 7. Now, chapter 5 is the chapter on the Temple of Eternal Fire. This chapter gives a very vivid historical account of the temple, its construction and reconstruction, the linkages with the Rigvedic Aryans and the Indian Hindu traders of Multan from Punjab and Sindh. The account, most importantly, which Sir mentioned, the account of Jamshedji Modi, a Parsi, based on the evidence about the shrine, very solid evidence he actually provides about the shrine not being a Parsi structure because of, the kind of very visible presence of Hindu symbols, the manner in which Hindus cremate their dead, and the manner in which they perform their rituals. In fact, the beautiful pictures and figures in this chapter, especially of the temple, taken from every side, and that too over a period of time, stand out. Because the temple came up, as I said, it was built and rebuilt, so there have been different phases of construction. And so some of the photos, some pictures, from museums here and there all over the world, it's actually very enchanting, very amazing, and it is actually, somehow you can get a sense of how much of, effort has been put in, not just to construct and reconstruct, but also to preserve the place. Now, chapter 6, which is in many ways the core chapter, I could say, because it is about Baba Nanak, Baba Sri Chand, and the Udasi tradition. Now, this chapter gives a very interesting account of the Udasi tradition. What particularly caught my attention is that there is a mention, particularly in the footnotes, that Baba Nanak is considered as the greatest traveler ever born in the Indian subcontinent. I repeat, greatest traveler ever born in the Indian subcontinent. He traveled to far off places, that too on foot, for years together. And that perhaps explains that, why there is this very profound connect between Baba Nanak and this temple, because this temple is considered to be one of those places where Baba Nanak actually spent some time while he was returning from East Africa. The chapter number 7, which is another very important chapter, very interesting chapter, it is on inscriptions. Now, this chapter has some very, very beautiful photos and pictures of at least 21 inscriptions, very vivid. And these inscriptions have been mentioned in the book several times in several different contexts. And the line-by-line translation in Hindi and English of the inscription, which has been so meticulously done, it is something amazing, and it requires superhuman efforts to do so. And I think only a scholar of Professor Sarao's repetition could have actually done justice to it. There is also a section in this book which highlights some very notable visits to this temple, and certainly Baba Nanak tops the list when we list out the names of these very important personalities who have paid visit to this temple over the years. Several travelers, in fact, from the West have also made stoppage here. And one of those very important would be the Russian merchant and traveler Nikitin. He visited the temple en route to India. Also, there are some very strikingly beautiful postage stamps in honor of the temple, which the government of Azerbaijan has issued from time to time. This clearly goes to show, in fact, it's an indication of the cultural significance of the shrine, even for the Republic of Azerbaijan. In many ways, it is their pride. Among some other special visitors from India, their pictures are also there, besides the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan and his wife. And as the author really mentioned, that they have actually, the President took a very important, he took a lot of interest in making sure that the renovation happened the way it did, the preservation happened, and also his role in ensuring that this temple complex got the UNESCO tag. And also, a big fund was actually, earmarked for that. So I guess we have every reason to feel very thankful to the government of Azerbaijan for preserving this marvelous piece of spiritual heritage, not just of significance to Azerbaijan, but to the whole world. And again, I come to those special visitors. I saw a picture of one of our most loved external affairs minister, the late Sushma Swaraj. She visited the shrine in the year 2018, a very pretty picture of Mrs. Swaraj praying there, and also a picture of the Vice President of India. I think he visited there in the year 2019. The bibliography is very impressive. In fact, I am tempted to read more and more on this. And yes, there are some very, very beautiful pictures of paintings by some very, very, very good paintings. One of them, especially my favorite, is the painting by Raja Ravi Verma, that painting of Parvati, Shiva, and Nandi. Very, very beautiful. It was an absolute joy, I'll tell you, reading it. I have recommended it to everyone whom I know, my colleagues, my students, my friends. Thank you so much, Professor Sarao, for this beautiful book, because it actually has transported both of us to that beautiful, amazing spiritual site, which at first glance, we could sort of understand that it was a Hindu shrine, but we didn't have the necessary kind of research to back it up. You have done it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Padhyay, for such a comprehensive review of the book. And it's great to know that you have been there and you beautifully correlated the book and your visit. And your vivid account of travelers from Guru Nanak to Sushma Swaraj is wonderful to know. And I'm so happy that we're able to get you in today's book discussion. Because those kind of historical facts are put in the book, and a scholar like you verifying the facts and congratulating Professor Sarao, and I'm sure Professor Sarao must be very happy to know that what he has written is something very amazing. And thank you for your wonderful insights. So now let's invite chief guest of our today's program, His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Shikaliev, Ambassador of Azerbaijan to India. He is presently Ambassador to the Republic of Azerbaijan to India and concurrently accredited to Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives and Sri Lanka. He has served as Director of the Azerbaijan International Development Agency, Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2011 to 18 and Director of Department of Economic Cooperation and Development, MFA from 2010-11. He has also served as a Consular Embassy of Republic of Azerbaijan in Washington, D.C. from 2006 to 9 and Consular Permanent Mission of the Republic of Azerbaijan to the United Nations. So we honored to have you here, His Excellency, and now we invite you to have your address. Over to you.
Dear ladies, gentlemen, dear members of the panel, it is an honor and privilege to be in this distinguished institution and to speak on a wonderful occasion of a beautiful book, a book that is dedicated not only to the Indian heritage and culture in the region of Southern Caucasus. You call it Central Asia. We call it Southern Caucasus, but it is Azerbaijan. The purpose of the book is to bring to the knowledge that Indian heritage is preserved in Azerbaijan to the wide Indian audience. You should know that Indians are loved in Azerbaijan. When you walk in the streets of Baku city and you say you are from India, people smile up. They say welcome. And that is why when yesterday, after this pandemic lockdown for 2 years, I had a phone call from Air Arabia and they said, did you open up electronic visa for Indian nationals in Azerbaijan? And I said, yes. And he said, hooray! I said exactly the same. I said when yesterday I learned that e-visa is working. He said, I will inform all tourism operators that e-visa to Azerbaijan is open. Now, in this beautiful book that speaks about the eternal fire, you should understand what eternal fire is. Eternal fire, it means a living fire which was there for centuries and centuries. And in Azerbaijan used to be 3 places with eternal fire. Now only one is alive, that is Burning Hill, Yanardağ. You Google, you find it. That is a hill, the slope of it is burning maybe 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, maybe even longer. Now in Atashkar, in Indian temple, there was eternal fire till late 1960s. And something happened there because of drilling of in the oil fields around, and the gas that was naturally coming and nourishing this fire for thousands of years, it disappeared. So it is not because of the noble family. It was long before noble family came to Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan became known due to noble family because the production, the commercial production of oil started with this noble family coming to Azerbaijan. Now, when Sushma Swaraj, the late Sushma Swaraj, came to the Atashkar temple, I accompanied her, and she stood in front of the fire and she made namaste, and her press officer took on his mobile the picture from the other side and immediately shared it with a tweet, and that tweet went viral. It went viral because first, the beautiful picture, and in that book exactly the same picture is used, and the approach and the holiness of the atmosphere, it all worked. And before we entered it, we saw some 10 big buses full of Indian tourists. Some 10 buses, I think roughly could be, 300, 400 Indian tourists. So this is a must place for Indian tourists to visit. And that is why before pandemic, the number of Indian visitors to Azerbaijan was doubling. 2018, 2019, it was doubling. And Atashkar Temple, it was a must to visit place for Indian tourists. Now, when you walk in the center of the capital, Baku city, you see many Indian restaurants that were opened there because of the Indian visitors coming to Azerbaijan. So not only when the spice route was connecting India via Azerbaijan to Europe, we had our civilizations were connected, but today we also feel connected. We feel very much connected. Indians feel very much at home when they come to Baku city. And Azerbaijanis and me personally, we adore, we love Indian movies. Yeah. We love Indian movies and we love Indian food also. So tolerance is in the nature of Azerbaijani people. That is why the Indian Atashkar temple, it was preserved as a museum because it is in the culture of Azerbaijan to have respect to other nations' cultures and preserve them. So we are not, even if we are Muslim minority in Azerbaijan, we have deep respect to the culture of other nations. Now, there are Zoroastrians. So Zoroastrians, they worshipped fire not as a goddess, god of fire, not Agni god, but through fire they tried to unite to the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who has so many names. So it was their way of worshipping fire. And of course, the Atashkar temple is a wonderful memory. Of course, different interpretations could be, but basically, your book, Mr. Sarao, it serves the purpose of unity. Unity of people of India and people of Azerbaijan. It serves the common heritage. It serves the nobility of spiritual enlightenment and the way of getting to the God. That is why the book shows that there is eternal temple in Surakhani in Azerbaijan to the Indian audience, and I hope that now, with the resumption of the tourism travel, people will be visiting Atashkar temple. They will be aware more and more about it after reading your book, and I believe that there will be more visitors and there will be more books about Indian-Azerbaijani historic relations, current relations. I will tell you more. I visited Atashkar temple when I was from childhood because it was on a way to the summer house that we had in Buzavna village. And I visited it. You cannot even compare how it looks now to what it was at that time. So after inclusion to the heritage list of UNESCO, the Atashkar temple, it became, very beautiful, very attractive. So renovation was done with the love, with due and deep respect to the Indian culture. And I want to say that this is what we have in our heart. In our heart we have the history of our nations, and the history shows that Azerbaijan was on a way for Indian travelers, for Indian tourists, throughout centuries. And throughout centuries, they were worshipping in Azerbaijan in a temple that is preserved. When last monk died of age, the government of Azerbaijan preserved this temple as a museum. So it is there. E-visa is open. Tourism operators are waiting for you, and you can get visa to Azerbaijan in 3 hours. So please visit the ancient land of fire, Azerbaijan. Thank you. Lovely being here.
Thank you, His Excellency, for your wonderful insight and your invitation to all of us to visit Azerbaijan. And you rightly pointed out that we have a lot of shared common heritage, and we should work together to enhance people to people and also various kind of other cultural relations through and IGNCA being one of the prominent organization which is working on such aspects will definitely, our member secretary is here, will definitely like to respond to some of your suggestions, like how IGNCA can further extend, this is your first visit I believe, and how we can do more and more cultural cooperation and other activities in jointly and also here and also in Azerbaijan. So with this now I would like to thank you for your wonderful address and thank you for your coming and presence. And now I invite Dr. Chandagnoti, Member Secretary IGNCA, who is also the chair for this program, to deliver the concluding address.
His Excellency, the Ambassador of Republic of Azerbaijan, Dr. Ashraf Shekhalev, the author of the book, Professor K.T.S. Sarao, the esteemed panelist, Professor Kaldeep Chandagnoti, Professor Archana Upadhyay, my colleague, Professor Ramesh Chandra Gaur, and distinguished audience. IGNCA is really happy to be a part of this book release function because this is really an important publication. Why I am saying this is an important publication? Because this has come from a scholar like Professor K.T.S. Sarao, who not only exhibited his scholarship in this book, but also his zeal of a traveler in this book. He would have opted to write a very popular kind of a book, which would have been very interesting and it would have played to the gallery. But he also remembered his job as an eminent scholar, and that is why this is a very fantastic book. A few days back when we were reading another book of similar kind, we tried to coin a word, and I dare to quote it here right now. It is scopular, scholarly popular book. So it is a scopular book, which is also gives you enough food for your thought, with proper insights and with proper citations and with proper bibliography, so that you can refer whatever is being said and quoted in the book. But it also keeps your interest alive. As Professor Archana Upadhyay has rightly mentioned, she read this book twice in a week's time. I also read this without a break. When I started, I finished in one instance. It is such an interesting book. Why it is interesting? Because it also gives you something to think about, how our ancestors might have thought of going there, or what would be the cultural relationship between India and its neighboring country. For past few days, we are working on an idea in this Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts to establish a center where we can study the cultural relations of India with its neighboring countries, so that we can find out the traces of the cultural entity of which Professor Agnihotri has referred as the Jambu Dweep. Because we may be different countries geographically, politically, and geographical boundaries can divide these countries. But there is a cultural relationship, there is a cultural linkage which unites all these countries. Otherwise, what would have prompted Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji to travel across the length and breadth of the country, of the world? His 4 Udasis, if you calculate, comes to something around 38,000 kilometers. That is why he is being called the most traveled saints in the world. 38,000 kilometers in those days, maybe 600 years ago, is not a joke. So we can imagine the intensity of finding out your roots and connects across the globe. And I must congratulate Professor Sarao for writing this book at this very juncture, where everyone is fighting for every inch of their borders and boundaries. At this time, a book like this really prompts you to think about the cultural linkages and forget about the geographical boundaries and barriers. Not only geographical boundaries and barriers, but also linguistic boundaries and barriers. So in that way, it works like a unifier for all of us. The esteemed presence of His Excellency the Ambassador also gives us encouragement and also gives us an opportunity to thank the people of Azerbaijan for not only preserving that monument, but also making it popular across the world. That is why people from even other countries are also coming to Azerbaijan to visit this Baku temple. I have seen many people coming from other countries. Some of my friends from other countries have also referred that they go to this, to visit this place. This is also an opportunity to thank His Excellency the Ambassador for letting us know how Azerbaijan people love Indian people and what are the cultural relations between the Indian and Azerbaijan people. Indian cinema is, of course, popular across the world, I know that, but especially the food and the textile and the handicraft which is prevailing in both these countries have a lot of similarities. We also work under another project where we are trying to find out similarities of different handicrafts and textiles between these countries. So in a way, this has been a great opportunity for Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts to also understand what more we can do on this kind of a project with countries like Azerbaijan, and also how such books and such readings can be promoted. The basic purpose of this book release function and book discussion series is to encourage the youngsters, especially the scholars who would like to go further into the details of any kind of a study. And I'm very happy, and I must congratulate my colleague, Professor Ramesh Gaur, under whose leadership the entire Kalanidhi team works day and night to organize these kind of functions. Only to give you an idea, in one calendar year, we have organized more than 24 such functions. That comes to 2 functions in a month, which is a kind of a record in any kind of a condition. So this has been the track record of the Kalanidhi division, and I must congratulate. And also, I must thank Professor Sarao for giving acceptance to hold this function here. I know that there are many who are watching this program live on Facebook and YouTube, and definitely it would spread across the social media very fast, and people would be interested to learn more about this book. I must also congratulate the publisher, Bloomsbury, who has brought out this book in a very beautiful manner. The size of the book is very tempting. I must say that sometimes only by seeing the size and the presentation of the book also gives you some kind of an impetus to read that book. And that is why I must congratulate the publisher also. Thank you very much. And once again, my best wishes to Professor K.T. Tharao. Thank you.
Thank you so much all for your gracious presence. This was a thought-provoking session. Special thanks to Professor K.T.S. Tharao, who wrote and compiled this book. This book is absolutely necessary read for students and scholars of Hindu and Sikh religious traditions, especially the history and epigraphy of Udasi Parampara. With these words, we sincerely thank our chief guest, Dr. Ashraf Shikaliev ji. Thanks to Professor Kaldeep Chandagnoti ji. Thanks to Professor Archana Upadhyay ji. Thanks to Member Secretary of IGNCA, Dr. Joshi ji. Thanks to Dean IGNCA, Professor R.C. Gaur ji. Special thanks to the Media Center, Publication Unit, Outreach Section of IGNCA, and Service and Supply Section of IGNCA for all their support. We also thank the audience, both online and offline. On that note, we say goodbye to all of you. I now invite you all for refreshment outside the Audi. Thank you.